Hi, my name is Gabriela from TulipArt Designs and you are extremely welcome or welcome back on my creative channel here, where I'm showing you watercolor sketching ideas, tips and tricks. I'm showing you how I try new supplies and I am giving you answers to your questions. And one of your questions last month, no, in December, was how do I add and how do I make my watercolor darker when it's gonna be hard probably for me to explain, but after wet in wet, how do I make it darker once I already have the paint dry out on the paper? So I hope I set the question proper, but if you've already experienced troubles with making your dried watercolor on your paper darker, this video is definitely for you. So let's start in. Okay, so for today's video I have some watercolor paper. I have one from 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐜. It's a professional, it's cold pressed and it's very nice with a bit of a texture. Then I have my watercolor set here. I'm using my Mary Blue. Any watercolor will do the job as far as it's not the cheapest ones, you know, for €1 maybe it will not really do the same job that you see I'm doing here. Then I have my brush. I have a round brush here to just demonstrate something. Water and a towel, paper towel, kitchen paper towel is also very useful. So let's say that we want to use wet in wet, and this is a technique that I used in almost every watercolor sketching class I have, also on my Patreon or when I show you ideas here. So watercolor technique wet in wet is when your surface is wet and I just add water. I check if there's too much water when I turn it to the side, and I can pick this extra water with a dry brush like this. Then we take some paint. Let's grab some golden green that I have here, and we start tapping on the edges, something that I show you. Then the paint bleeds. You enjoy how it bleeds and everything, and then you are done with this. You think that it's gonna be okay, so you stop and you wait for this to dry. I will speed up the process and use my heat gun to make it dry. Okay, and then it's dry and you suddenly realize that it's a bit too light than what you've expected, because watercolor usually dries lighter and the value is definitely way lighter than it is when the watercolor is still wet on the paper. And then you are thinking, okay, what can I do? How can I darken this thing? So one option is to pick up some color and just go on top of it. And then it will become darker. And because watercolor is transparent, you will still see that it's darker on the edges and it is lighter in the middle. But let's say that you want it to be even darker, so you pick even more of this golden green and go one more time while this second layer is still wet and add it again, so it will bleed. So you could see that there is a darker edge. So this is one way you can darken your watercolor. And another way is, let's say that you have the wet area. Now my water is dirty, so you can definitely see where I'm putting watercolor, like this. So let's say we have our wet surface and we are adding some paint here on the edges. It bleeds very nice, but you still want it to be darker. So one of the things I would do is pick more concentrated paint and keep adding here, and I will probably move it around with my brush just like this. Sometimes I will probably mix my golden green with a little bit darker green and add it again, and just let it bleed and mix with it on the paper. Okay, just like this. And again, if this dries lighter than what I wanted, I will just make a second layer on top of it. Usually wet technique is definitely lighter in the end, just because one time you have water on the paper, and when you mix your watercolor here and you add it in the water, then it means that you add even more water to your pigment, which makes the watercolor even more transparent. So I hope this makes sense when I am explaining it. But let me show you that, for example, you want this blue wet in wet technique. So what I would do if I want a bit darker blue is I will use very transparent blue as my wet surface, and then I will pick more pigmented watercolor and I will throw it in, and then of course it will still bleed, but it will be darker and more vibrant, because the first layer is already having color, you see. So the whole result will be darker than what it would be if I used clean water. You can always pick even more paint and just go again on the edges, and it will mix just on the paper like this. So I will clean my brush. I hope that this answered your question. I can show you one more thing. Let's say we use wet in wet, and that's our wet surface. Let's make sure there's not too much water, like this. I think I have too much water here, so I will just clean it a little bit, and I will take some blue again. So for example, let's say that I want some purple colors in the end. And instead of mixing it on the palette and using it, I can try mixing it here on the paper, and then this will create different tones. Some will be more blue and some will be more red and pinkish, depends which blue and which red you're gonna use. But when you are trying to mix colors using wet in wet directly on the paper, that's quite nice because it is definitely unpredictable. You don't really control the whole thing, but you have quite beautiful results in the end. And you have darker tones and you have lighter tones, and you can keep adding darker here on the edge if you want to, or you can get extra red and add it maybe here, just like this. And just playing around could be quite enough. If you have thicker watercolor paper, 100% cotton, and if it's cold pressed, then the paper could absorb more water and you definitely have more time and freedom to experiment with wet in wet. So sometimes if your wet in wet technique doesn't really give you what you want from it, then it's probably not you, but maybe it's the paper. So you need to ask yourself if your paper is 100% cotton, if it's cold press or hot pressed, if it's the thicker one or just a tiny watercolor paper. So all these kind of questions could be, could help you get the answers why your wet in wet doesn't work. And of course it can help you with the results when you try to darken your result. Wait, how to explain this? The supplies matter when you want to add extra layers to darken your results. Okay, so what I mean is that if your watercolor paper cannot take more water, then it will be hard to darken this certain piece or whatever you are painting. Okay, I hope this made sense and it was helpful. So I hope you learned something and I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for being here and watching it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments or contact me through the email so I can help you out. Check out the other platforms where I'm sharing tons of content, and on my Patreon where I am teaching almost weekly watercolor sketching classes to help you get creative. And yeah, consider subscribing for my channel so you will not miss any of the new videos, and I hope to see you all next week. Bye!